Hello, and welcome back to Tips and Time Savers. I'm Danny Rocks. In today's lesson, I'm going to respond to a viewer who asked for my help in combining two Excel workbooks. Let's take a look at both of the workbooks. Here's workbook number 1. Notice that there are 26 records, and the first field contains a unique identifier, the member ID. When I take a look at the second workbook, notice that there are fewer than 26 records. However, we're fortunate in that column A contains, again, the member ID as the unique identifier. So knowing that I have both worksheets contain a common field, member ID, my approach in combining them is to use the VLOOKUP function. All right, now, first order of business is what I want to do when I look at the second workbook. It's going to be a lot easier if I make this a worksheet inside workbook number 1. So the easiest way to do that is to select the worksheet and then, or the label for the worksheet, and then either right mouse click, or in this case I'm going to use one of the menu commands. Home tab of the ribbon, cells group, in the drop down next to format, I want to select move or copy the sheet. So in this case I want to keep workbook number 2. I don't want to delete it, so I want to create a copy, but I want to move it to another open workbook. I want to move it over here to this workbook, and I want to move it as the second worksheet in this workbook. Click OK. So now you can see that in workbook number 1 I have both of the worksheets. All right, I want to be able to take the information from the third column, the fourth column, the fifth column, 6th, and the 7th. In other words, the information from website, city, state, country, and phone fields. So I'm going to select the labels. I'll use Control-C to make a copy, come over here into my master worksheet, Control-V to make a copy of them. All right, I'm going to use the VLOOKUP function. The VLOOKUP function has 3 arguments. My first argument is I'm going to look for a match to this cell, the membership ID. Where am I going to look for it? I'm going to look for it in an array. The array is going to be this group of records. Now, rather than referring to range A4 through G18 all the time, I'm going to use a named range. So I'm going to select the range from my array, and I'm going to give it a name, list 2. So I clicked up here in the name box, and I created a name that begins with a letter, which is important and contains no spaces. My third argument in VLOOKUP is to say in which column is the information. So in this case, counting from the left, website is the third column. All right, we're ready to use VLOOKUP. Equals VLOOKUP, and I'll use tab, and I use Control-A to bring up the function arguments dialog box. So my lookup value is going to be over here in column A in this row. Now, since I'm going to be copying this formula across, what I want to do is I want to freeze in place the reference to column A. So while the row will change, I always want to refer to column A. The lookup array, remember I created that name range up here? So if I have a name range, I can use the F3 keyboard shortcut to bring up the paste names dialog box. Select that name range, which is the array, and remember for the column index, the website was the third column, counting over from the left in the second worksheet. I'm going to use the fourth argument because I want an exact match. I want a match on the membership ID, not an approximate match. So I'm going to type in false. And now I'm good to go. Click OK, and there you go. I used VLOOKUP to look for this value. Now remember, I put a $sign in front of column A because as I copy this across, I always want to refer to column A. Where did I look? I looked in that name range, list 2. Where was the information in which column? Counting from the left, the website was in the third column in the array. And I use false because I want an exact match and not an approximate match. So now I can copy this down, double click and autofill. Uh-oh, why do I have this ugly NA error message? Well, let's take a look. Here is member ID 105. It exists in the first list, but member 105 does not exist over here in the second list. That's why we have this ugly NA error message. Is there a way to remove that? Yes, there is. Fortunately, if you're using Excel 2007 or Excel 2010, there's a wonderful new function that was added called if error. Let's see how this works. I'll use Control A to open up the function arguments dialog box. 2 arguments. For the value is going to be the VLOOKUP function, or I should say the result of the VLOOKUP function, and if there is an error, we want to display a blank. So the way we do that is double quotation mark, space, double quotation mark. Now, let's apply this. So let's come over here to the first cell that uses VLOOKUP, and we want to include the if error function and then the VLOOKUP function as the first argument. So after the equal sign, type if error, left parentheses. Here's our first argument. Use a comma to separate the arguments. For our second argument, double quotation mark, space, double quotation mark, and of course remember to put a concluding or a matching right parentheses. So now when I click this down, you'll see that those NA error messages go away. All right. Remember that I use the $sign to freeze the reference to column A. So if I copy this over to pick up the city is going to be in the 4th column. So if I just make a copy over here, I want to change one argument. I want to change 3 to 4. The city is in the 4th column. Again, I can copy that down. Really, really simple. And I'll do something similar over here. I'll change the 4 as the column to 5. So the information for the state is in the 5th column. And again, I can just double click and have that copied all the way down. Notice that there are no NA messages. So again, it's really very simple. Copy this over and change the 5 as the column index to 6. Double click. And finally, copy this over and make one change. I'm going to change the 6 to 7. And again, I'm going to double click, and there you go. Really, really, really very, very simple. Now, notice over here I have some zeros and things like that, and I don't have the formatting that I had in the original. The way that I got the formatting is I use the special formatting. So I've selected the records for the phone field. I'm going to click on the More button over here, and what I want to do on the Number tab is come down here and click Special, and I want to use this mask with the phone number. So now click OK. So you see that I didn't have to add in the parentheses for the area code and the dashes for the phone number. It was done with formatting. So really, really very simple. VLOOKUP is it's an essential function to learn if you're going to be a master of Excel. And I use the new if error function so that any error messages that would display, because I didn't have a matching record, now display the blank. So the if error, VLOOKUP, and then I use double quotation mark, space, double quotation mark. So there you go. Now you've learned how easy it is to combine 2 lists. We use VLOOKUP because we had a unique identifier, member ID, in both lists. And I'll look for you in the next lesson.